The sounds of shortwave, an endless barrage of beeps, whistles, clicks, and noises. To casual listeners, an irritating collection of senseless sounds. But to the serious shortwave enthusiast, these noises are symbolic of the fascinating hobby of shortwave listening. Buried amidst the squawks and groans of your receiver is a world of intrigue.
905 564 905 564.
Is this a spy station? Many listeners think so. But so far, no one has answered the question for sure, at least publicly. These so-called numbers stations are found on many frequencies, broadcasting their cryptic messages in several languages. They follow a regular schedule. Numbers broadcasts in English are rare. Most are in Spanish. One of those transmitters is in Havana, Cuba.
545 545.
Modern technology has developed an incredible array of methods to transfer information from one place to another via the miracle of radio communications. Some of these methods are as simple as on and off keying of the radio signal itself. We call this continuous wave, or CW. These Morse code signals populate the shortwave spectrum and are easily recognized by their single-tone dots and dashes when monitored by a receiver with its BFO turned on. Occasionally, some commercial and military stations are heard using frequency shift keying. In this mode, the signal or carrier wave is always on, even when the operator's key is up. When he presses the key, the frequency of the carrier wave shifts slightly, and a change in pitch is heard. To remove the distracting second pitch, the listener merely tunes his receiver dial to lower the pitch of that unwanted key-up tone until it can no longer be heard, and then copies normal Morse code. A much more commonly used form of frequency shift keying is radio teletype, or RTTY, as its RTTY abbreviation is pronounced by its users. It sounds very similar to FSK-CW. The teletype signal is composed only of dots, however, and is usually much faster than CW. Teletype sends only letters, numbers, and punctuation. To send pictures, a different technique is used. Facsimile is a method of sending sounds which correspond to contrast changes. Weather maps, photographs, and other pictorial information sound much like a badly scratched phonograph record, as they are traced line by line and sent over the air. Slow scan television is another method occasionally used to transmit visual images by radio. While nowhere nearly as clear as the picture on your home TV, slow scan is useful for sending images of non-moving subjects. One important application of radio is in the transmission of data from point to point. Remote measurements of wind, rainfall, water levels, pressure, or any other parameters may be converted to tones, which are transmitted and then decoded back again into useful information many miles away. Most of the Western world sets its time and frequency measuring equipment by one of two government broadcasting facilities. WWV at Fort Collins, Colorado, transmits precisely on 2.5, 5, 10, 15, and 20 megahertz.
At the tone 19 hours, 25 minutes, Coordinated Universal Time.
In addition to time signals, WWV also provides regular propagation reports to listeners. CHU is located at Dominion Observatory, Ottawa, Canada, and broadcasts at 3.33, 7.335, and 14.67 megahertz.
CHU Canada, Eastern Standard Time, 6 hours, 24 minutes.
6 heures, 24 minutes.
Not all radio signals transmit long enough to be heard as tones, or even seem to contain information. Pulse transmissions are created as a train of consecutive sharp bursts of radio energy. Each pulse may last for only a few thousandths of a second. Pulse transmissions are often used for navigational purposes, like those of the Coast Guard's Loran. You don't need your BFO on to hear these powerful signals just below 2 megahertz, best monitored at night. Other navigational beacons may be heard by tuning just below the Loran signals. Amplitude modulation, or AM, is most commonly heard being used by international broadcasting stations and CBers. It is easily tuned in by unsophisticated listeners using modest radios. But AM has its disadvantages. For one thing, because of the amount of spectrum space taken up by an AM signal, atmospheric disturbances sometimes alter portions of the radio wave. This causes a peculiar distortion called selective fading. The atmosphere may be even less discriminating and cause the entire signal to flutter in strength. Sunrise and sunset are among the greatest influences on this phenomenon. Propagation refers to the path taken by a radio wave after it leaves the transmitting antenna. As we've already heard, the Earth's ionosphere, the upper portion of the atmosphere, can do strange things to radio waves. Multipath is another of those things. It results from some reflected radio waves arriving at your antenna slightly later than the more direct waves. You may hear both of these waves, and the resulting delay sounds like an echo. To protect their coveted frequencies from intruders, and to enable listeners to tune in to the correct dial setting before programming begins, international broadcasters transmit a repeating musical theme known as an interval signal. One of the most familiar to shortwave listeners is that of Germany's Deutsche Welle. While we're on the subject of international broadcasting stations, let's listen to a sampling of the infinite variety of programming available from around the world. Our own National Telecommunications and Information Administration operates powerful transmitting facilities throughout the high-frequency spectrum. Both the Voice of America and American Forces radio and television services may be heard on several frequencies every time you tune through the broadcast bands. Commonly presenting regional programming to satisfy their diverse listening audience, Radio Canada International features many languages and broadcasts to a wide geographical territory.
But for our African listeners, so that you can hear us again in half an hour's time, that's 2000 hours GMT, here are the frequencies. 17820, 15325, 9555, and 7295 kilohertz in the 16, 19, 31, and 41 meter bands. Dans quelques instants, notre émission en langue française dirigée vers l'Europe et l'Afrique sur ces mêmes fréquences. This is Gillian McCormick.
Along with Ian McFarland.
In Montreal. See you soon.
Cheerio for now.
Typical of the many productions designed for political persuasion, Radio Moscow is a formidable contestant for shortwave frequencies.
This is Radio Moscow World Service. It is 20 hours Moscow time, 17 hours Greenwich Mean Time. The news, read by Marina Dimova. First, the headlines.
Not to be outdone, Radio Peking seeks its share of the listening audience, as does Radio Hanoi and Radio Vietnam, and so on. One of the real pioneers in shortwave broadcasting is the venerable Voice of the Andes, Christian Mission Station HCJB in Quito, Ecuador.
From the heart of the Andes Mountains, we welcome you to Passport. We invite you to stay tuned for an hour of good listening from the Voice of the Andes in Quito, Ecuador, as we present Passport.
And of course, no sampling of international broadcasters would be complete without mention of the British Broadcasting Corporation.
BBC World Service.
These are but a selected few of the myriad broadcasters from all corners of the earth to be heard on your shortwave receiver. Radio Finland, Voice of Nigeria, Voice of Greece, Radio Japan, and Radio Norway. Just a handful more for your listening fare. Although our sampling has concentrated on English language broadcasts, it must be remembered that shortwave listening is a worldwide hobby. You will encounter languages and dialects you've probably never heard before.
Carros enormes, e isso automaticamente tira o interesse daqueles que querem comprar carros maiores e então vão se dedicar aos carros menores.
Because of the increasing numbers of users cramming into the radio spectrum, techniques are being developed to reduce the signal bandwidth required to send information. Two-way voice communications are usually sent by single sideband, which requires less than half the bandwidth necessary for normal AM. SSB is unintelligible without the use of a BFO in the receiver. But switch in the BFO or product detector, and an amazing thing happens.
I'd say about 75 to 80 degrees at the moment, and nice breeze coming out of the Pacific there.
There are other ways to cram large quantities of information into the space normally occupied by just one carrier wave. The processes may be called independent sideband or multiplex. Several messages, voice, teletype, CW, telemetry, or whatever, may be sent at one time. To the simple receiver, this sounds like a buzzsaw. But with the proper equipment, an incredible amount of information is being spewed out on several subchannels within the bandwidth of that signal. Another advantage of single sideband for communications is the absence of annoying heterodynes from other stations near the frequency. Every CBer knows the familiar sound of AM heterodynes, especially on Channel 19. Not all radio signal interference is incidental. Some is intentional. For political reasons, many countries of the world are not too thrilled about their citizens hearing unfavorable propaganda. Often, those countries will transmit defensive signals on the same frequencies as the uninvited broadcaster. These raucous sounds are designed to discourage the listener. A great deal of unintentional interference is generated by shortwave communicators. Key clicks, produced every time a Morse code key is depressed and released, may sometimes be transmitted as a clicking noise to be heard at frequencies considerably removed from the carrier frequency. A close cousin of key clicks is called splatter. It results from overmodulation, and its distorted sidebands may be heard interfering with reception on nearby frequencies. An annoying source of interference encountered at various places throughout the shortwave spectrum is the frequency sweeper. An industrial or scientific measuring device, it is recognized by its swishing sound as it sweeps its frequency back and forth across the dial. As if these sources of radio interference were not enough, the shortwave listener must often contend with a variety of electrical appliance noises as well. One of the most common is that of the fluorescent lamp, commonly encountered at the lower frequencies. Brush-type motor-driven appliances such as electric mixers, hair dryers, and vacuum cleaners are capable of an assault in their own right. Long-term sharp buzzes, especially prominent at night, frequently indicate arcing or discharge in overhead power lines. When a receiver is used near some other electronics equipment, like a scanner radio, signals from that adjacent equipment may often be heard throughout the tuning range of the radio. Nearby TV sets are a common irritant to shortwave listeners. They radiate a variety of incidental signals. Synchronization buzz is most troublesome at low frequencies and easily identified by its repeated appearance as the shortwave receiver dial is tuned through its range. TV sync buzz may be further identified by listening to one buzz frequency and noting how its characteristic sound changes as the TV picture moves. The Russian woodpeckers. Arriving suddenly in the mid-1970s, these pulse transmissions blanketed communications around the world. When analyzed with sophisticated receiving equipment, these pulses turn out to be a form of over-the-horizon backscatter radar, an electronic defense system to detect and identify intruders over the Russian borders for thousands of miles. When these paralyzing signals obliterate shortwave reception, there is little the listener can do but move his dial. But sources of radio signals and interference are not confined to our planet alone. Much of the background noise you hear as hiss is actually cosmic noise. Distant galaxies, the planet Jupiter, and even our own sun radiate broadband signals which may be detected over a large part of the radio spectrum. The sun is especially strong as a noise generator. Solar flares, giant eruptions on the sun's surface, may cause enormous communications blackouts, even after traveling through 93 million miles of space. The following recording was made on a shortwave receiver tuned near 30 megahertz, and lets you hear firsthand radio signals from our sun. But not all solar effects are bad. Worldwide high-frequency radio communications depend upon the sun to ionize or electrically charge the upper ionosphere. When so charged, the ionosphere behaves as a giant mirror for shortwave signals, reflecting them back to Earth over great distances.
决定投降的，官方没有说恐怖分子投降是不是有任何条件。最初4名恐怖分子曾经要求释放关在埃及监狱的2名巴勒斯坦人质。
We could never have heard that signal from halfway around the world if it hadn't been for solar enhancement of our ionosphere. How can we improve reception? How can we separate myths from facts about antennas and receiving equipment? These and many other questions will be answered on Side 2 of the Sounds of Shortwave.
You have been listening to the special English program, Words and Their Stories. It was written by Harold Berman. This is Morris Joyce. Next on VOA, Critics' Choice. In these weekly programs, we bring you glimpses of the arts, music, and literature in the United States.
The two most critical parts of any effective monitoring station are the receiver and the antenna. For many listeners, they are the only parts of their monitoring station. The proper design of these two components is critical to effective listening. First, let's examine receivers. In the 1940s and 50s, names like Hallicrafters, Hammarlund, and National dominated the consumer's world of shortwave listening. Bulky, fragile vacuum tubes comprised the nerve centers of these radios. Tubes were hot. They drew excessive power. They were inefficient and expensive. Modern solid-state equipment is vastly superior to any but the very best of these earlier receivers. Some of those radios are still available on the used market and may be a good investment if the price is right. But how do you choose a good receiver? Are there a few key features to look for, like when you're buying a car? Yes, there certainly are. Among the most important characteristics for an adequate receiver are stability, sensitivity, selectivity, and frequency readout accuracy. Let's discuss these features one at a time. Stability means the ability of a receiver to stay on frequency once a signal is tuned in. This is crucial to acceptable reception of single sideband, CW, teletype. As a matter of fact, about the only signals which don't require high stability are AM broadcast stations. The instability of a receiver is indicated by two factors: thermal and mechanical drift. With thermal drift, the tuned-in station will gradually move off frequency while you are listening to its transmission. It is most readily diagnosed with the BFO, or product detector, turned on and adjusted to a low whistle. If the whistle slowly changes pitch, the receiver has thermal drift. For single sideband reception, drift like that would be intolerable.
The fundamental thing, the fundamental principle is found in your handbook, but we've revised it and trimmed it up and modernized it and so forth and so on. It's real effective.
Most receivers have some initial drift when they are first turned on. They should settle down within a few minutes, however, and after 5 or 10 minutes should no longer drift noticeably. Mechanical drift is a symptom of unsturdy design. It is detected by tapping the receiver while the BFO is on with a station tuned in. If the pitch wobbles, the receiver has mechanical instability. It may be difficult to tune and maintain good reception. Sensitivity refers to the ability of a receiver to detect weak signals. The absolute sensitivity of a receiver cannot be determined by ear, and must be measured with instruments. Since few of us have such test equipment handy, we must devise other ways to get some idea as to whether a receiver has reasonable sensitivity. With 5 or 10 feet of wire casually strung from the receiver's antenna terminal, many signals should be heard throughout the tuning range of the receiver. During the daytime, there should be some very strong stations heard above 10 or 20 megahertz. At night, strong stations should be heard below that range. Selectivity refers to the ability of a receiver to reject interference from other stations very close to the frequency to which you are listening. A good way to check this characteristic is to select a crowded portion of the radio spectrum. Slowly tune through it, listening to the rapid appearance and disappearance of signals as you tune through them. Some receivers have variable selectivity. On narrow or sharp selectivity, the signals will actually have a crisp swishing sound as you tune across them. Frequency readout accuracy may not have a thing to do with a receiver's performance, but if you can't find a station, you can't listen to it. Nothing is so frustrating as learning the exact frequency of a signal you want to hear and then not having a dial calibrated accurately enough to tune it in. Similarly, it is very frustrating to intercept an exciting transmission and then have no idea what frequency it was on for logging or later reference. Some receivers have built-in crystal calibrators for more accurate reference, while newer radios have either very accurately calibrated dials or digital frequency displays. Try to get a receiver with readout accuracy within 1 kilohertz. At first consideration, the reception of strong signals might seem ideal. After all, they are least likely to suffer the indignities of interference, and their quality is bound to sound better. In fact, many low-cost and some more expensive receivers become overloaded by such signals. Front-end overload causes a variety of problems, including intermodulation. The same signal may be heard in several places across the dial. The ability of a receiver to handle large signals without overloading is a mark of quality design. If a receiver has all of these good performance characteristics which we have described, chances are that it will also have many more as well, such as good image rejection, a noise limiter, and good band spread as an aid to tuning, a stable band switch which doesn't cause the frequency to wobble all over the place as the receiving band is being changed. An S-meter is generally found on all communications receivers. A product detector is useful for the reception of single sideband, but earlier receivers had only a beat frequency oscillator used for CW reception. Be sure that SSB stations are easily and clearly receivable with your prospective radio. Where can a shortwave listener buy new and used equipment? Take a look at the advertisers in hobby electronics magazines, especially those published for radio amateurs. Reputable firms nationwide advertise their merchandise throughout the pages of these monthlies. Many dealers carry both new and used equipment because of trade-ins from their customers. Most amateur radio dealers are honest, and their equipment is realistically priced because of the highly competitive market. On the back pages of the magazines, look for individuals with classified listings. Often, used equipment will turn up there at great savings. But remember, when you buy from someone you don't know, be prepared to perform some repairs. Few people want to sell equipment which is working perfectly. There are exceptions, of course, but you will have to take that chance. Better yet, try to find a local ham radio operator to give you some assistance in locating a receiver. He'll do his best to try to answer your technical questions, too. Hams are eager to help newcomers to the growing field of hobby radio communications. Who knows? Your exposure to these incurable hams might spark an interest in taking your hobby just one step further. Probably no technical subject has as many myths associated with it as that of antennas. Ideas about impedance matching, transmission lines, horizontal versus vertical polarization, grounding, and so on, fill volumes. In fact, for shortwave listeners, there are only a very few important considerations in the design and installation of an effective antenna. First, it should be away from electrical power lines. This reduces both electrical noise pickup and shock hazard. Second, it should be more than 10 feet long, but generally need not be longer than 30 to 50 feet. In fact, the shorter the length, the less likely will be interference from standard broadcast stations. The antenna should be as high as possible, away from metal obstructions. Although the lead-in or transmission line may be as simple as a length of insulated wire, single-wire feed lines tend to pick up electrical interference quite easily. All commercial installations use coaxial cable. That's always a good idea. And for the short wave frequencies under 30 megahertz, virtually any kind of standard coaxial cable may be used for reception. Common RG58 or 59 will work just fine for lengths up to at least 100 feet. Only when transmission lines must run several hundred feet should the shortwave listener be concerned with a high-quality coax like RG8U. And don't worry about the insulation material. While foam dielectric is an advantage at VHF and UHF, shortwave signals couldn't care less. Horizontal or vertical polarization? That's entirely a matter of convenience. Personally, I use a 20-foot vertical pipe mounted at ground level on a ground rod for my shortwave reception. It outperforms almost anything I have ever used. Stay away from antennas with trap loading unless you want to listen only to those frequency ranges enhanced by the coils. Such antennas are designed for narrow frequency segments and reject other ranges. A ground is not absolutely necessary in a receiving station, but it is recommended. A good ground can help reduce electrical interference. Experiment by tying your receiver chassis and those of its accessories together with short pieces of braided wire, and then tie them all to the ground wire for best performance. A ground will also reduce shock hazard when the listener is touching two pieces of equipment at the same time. Try reversing the power plugs in the AC socket while experimenting for the best reduction in electrical noise interference. A good ground, by definition, is one which is large in gauge, short in length, and extensive in contact area with actual earth. If your receiver is on the third floor of a dwelling, forget about having an ideal ground. Still, an earth return may be an advantage. A cold water pipe is good, and sometimes the conduit pipe, which carries the AC wiring to the wall outlet, may be used. Again, only experimenting can determine whether you have an adequate ground. If you have the option of designing your own earth ground, use a metal pipe at least 4 feet in length and solder the ground wire directly to it. A ground is really of little protection against lightning. If lightning strikes your antenna, and that antenna is connected to your radio, kiss the radio goodbye. It's simple. Inline lightning arresters are available to reduce damage from nearby strokes and from electricity buildup, but nothing can save your equipment from a direct hit. The lesson is clear. During an electrical storm, or if you are going to be away for an extended period of time, disconnect the antenna line completely from your equipment and unplug equipment from the electrical mains. Preamplifiers and pre-selectors. Are they necessary? Probably not. If you have a good receiver and a good antenna, neither will be required, with one possible exception. A pre-selector can be very useful in reducing interference from strong signals. If you are plagued by intermod and images of phantom signals appear repeatedly throughout your tuning dial, interfering with desired stations, then a pre-selector will help. On the other hand, a preamplifier will increase the signal strengths of all received signals, including the offending ones. A preamplifier should never be used except as a last resort where all signal strengths are too low to be useful. Nature itself often plays havoc with radio reception. Our atmosphere is a giant electrostatic generator, capable of sending sparks charged with 100 million volts, with currents of up to 100,000 amps between clouds and the earth. These incredible discharges of lightning may be heard as broadband crashing noises for hundreds of miles away from the actual storm center. This noise is especially prevalent at the lower frequencies during spring and summer evenings. A good noise limiter, or better yet, a noise blanker, will help improve reception under these conditions. Assuming that you now have a good receiving installation, what hints might help in effective listening? Many books are available which make excellent reference volumes to assist you in listening. Most of these books are advertised in hobby radio magazines. But a few general ideas may be helpful in establishing your listening habits. First, forget about listening to frequencies below 6 megahertz or so during late mornings or afternoons. These lower frequencies are nighttime bands, and reception of them begins to perk up at dusk. Similarly, the higher frequencies above 15 or 20 megahertz are daytime bands, and reception falls off rapidly after dark. They don't usually come alive again until later the following morning. Naturally, these are only rules of thumb, but they are good rules, and provide a general guide to the best times for reception. There will be times when you are tuning through the shortwave bands that you will swear somebody has cut your antenna down. Signals will be very low in strength. You will examine your antenna, check your transmission line, wiggle your connectors. I know, I fall victim to this peculiarity of propagation all the time. It is especially noticeable at the higher frequencies, 20 to 30 megahertz. And once again, we have the sun to blame. Earlier, we discussed how solar flares can produce powerful rays which affect our ionosphere, that upper level of our atmosphere which reflects radio waves. Under some conditions, those solar emanations can increase background noise and even cause the ionosphere to be absorptive to radio waves. Sunspots also influence the ionosphere. When they are large in number, skip signals bounce off the ionosphere, permitting reception over incredible distances. Because of the erratic nature of high-frequency signal propagation, critical communications depend upon alternate systems, such as satellites and telephone lines for backup communications. We mentioned before that even the planet Jupiter is capable of transmitting powerful radio signals which may be heard on Earth as noise. This is an actual recording of a Jovian noise storm, recorded near 30 megahertz on a standard shortwave receiver. There are many signals arriving from outer space. It is not likely that any of them will be talking, however. But some signals are very strange due to their regularity. Pulsars have been mapped, sending their signals through billions of miles of space, and may be heard on Earth with sensitive receivers. Although pulsars are detected by receivers tuned to much higher frequencies than those of general coverage shortwave receivers, the following recording is included because of its interest. pulsars. Are they, as some imaginative writers and scientists contend, navigational beacons in the depths of interstellar space? Or are they purely natural, rhythmic bursts of radio energy? If they are natural, what physical process accounts for their tremendous variety and short periods? The controversy will continue for some time to come. By now, you should have a pretty good idea of what you will hear, how to hear it, and when to listen for it. There is, however, one important aspect of radio reception which we haven't touched, and that is where to listen. What frequencies are likely to yield the most interesting transmissions? Most shortwave listening can be divided into two distinct types: broadcasts and utilities. We have heard samples of both. By utilities, we mean all communications not intended for general reception. In other words, utilities are the non-broadcasters. Ship-to-shore, long-distance telephone relays, military communications, air-to-ground transmissions. All of these would be examples of utilities. By international agreement, types of communications are grouped together in blocks of frequencies. If you hear one broadcasting station, tune around. You're bound to hear more. We've already mentioned the distribution of the amateur bands. Short-range communications will be heard on the lower frequencies, typically below 7 megahertz. Long-distance and international transmissions favor the higher frequencies to take advantage of ionospheric skip. Although general coverage communications receivers tune from the standard broadcast band continuously through 30 megahertz, you will find almost all of your listening is spent between 4 and 22 megahertz. Several excellent books are available to help you know exactly where to look for stations of your particular interest. Shortwave listening clubs are plentiful and often advertised to attract new members. The club's newsletters are an excellent way to get up-to-the-minute frequency information. The hobby of shortwave listening is fascinating. You'll hear new nations being born, tactical military maneuvers, uncomplimentary propaganda, spy transmissions, an incredible assortment of satisfaction for every taste. But remember, unless you are listening to a general broadcast, all other two-way communications are considered private correspondence. In the United States, you are permitted to listen to any radio transmission, but you aren't allowed to talk about or to use for your own gain what you intercepted. Briefly, that's the law. And with a little pre-planning, you may hear it all just a little bit better than anyone else.
905 564 905 564 905 564